Artichokes and 45 below. He said he got that blowing out of Walla.
Come on, boy.
Innocently there was little.
Okay, hey. What?
Yes, she did.
She stole a broccoli head from out of your...
I put it over here, and then all of a sudden, she
Well, you know, dogs appreciate vegetables too.
She loved it. She loved it.
And that brings us to a very special edition of Marvin Gardens, June 2017. And it's particularly special, you might be able to tell because I'm standing in front of the camera, because I have my brother-in-law Craig as an excellent cinematographer helping me this month. I also have Mary Morris, my sister, Mary Perkins Morris, and she will be providing color, commentary, and beauty, along with my lovely wife, the French ballerina,
Oh, I love you.
Vanina Yako. And of course we have lots of dogs. We've got Jessie here in the foreground with her American flag scarfie on because we're in that season. Back here we have Tashi, who's a pug visiting from Florida, and she's hoping that I have some kind of treats in my hand, and she likes vegetable treats, so she fits right in here. And Frankie's around here someplace. He's hunting a little bit, looking for varmints and frogs and snakes and whatever he can get his hands on. Jolie's over lounging on the lawn chair back there. She's kind of taking it easy. But since we're here, we'll start with where we usually start, and that's chives. And they're a little overshadowed here by all these iris plants. But as you can see, they're doing well. And the one problem we have with chives is just remembering to harvest and use them. The blooming is all done for. That happens in May. This is all that's left of the blooms. There's little black seeds inside there that could be planted, and you could actually grow chive plants. We have our little water feature here, which is also inhabited. I just saw somebody jumping around in here, so we've got a little frog in here someplace, and a few nice, healthy-looking plants. And this is no man's land along here, which means it's just where I plant leftover seedlings that I can't bear to throw away. And so we've got a nice ground cherry, three ground cherry plants here, as well as 3 peppers, at least, a tomato that's not doing so hot, but will probably survive. This is an eggplant, another pepper, and a couple of more tomatoes. But those are just leftovers after the fact. The pet memorial area has been cleaned out a little bit, but it is slightly overrun with all these yellow pond irises, although they're done blooming. But little Mr. Sleeping Dachshund is still looking pretty good, though. We need to take a few weeds out of here. And that brings us to bed number 1, which is corn. Love growing corn just because it is what it is, and it grows so big. And this year, this bed is just sweet corn, Silver Queen, my favorite sweet corn variety, and doing pretty well. I love it when it's just bright green like this and sort of exploding. And you know, I had some sort of questionable germination, and so that's why that end of the bed is much taller than this end of the bed. But if you know the saying for corn, it's knee-high by the 4th of July, and since this is June, what is this, the 27th? Obviously we're way beyond that, so and it's looking healthy. When it looks just really green like that, it means that it's doing well, and the dachshunds are looking forward to having some ears of corn because they really like it, as does just about everybody. that brings us to bed number 2, and the first section here is all tomatoes. This is a beefsteak kind of tomato, topping way over the top of the cages here. The next one, I think this is Orange Chef, which we had a very good year with a couple years ago. And then this is a Roma, sort of an Italian paste tomato. They seem to be the smallest growing, but they also are the first ones to actually have, can you get in there? You won't be able to get too close with that camera. It doesn't focus close very well, but there are, you can see quite a few green tomatoes coming in already. And then the last one here is our personal favorite here at Sky Manor, and that's Juliet. And I think there might be some little green tomatoes. There's a couple right there, as you can see in the sunlight. Little teeny tiny ones there coming in. But these guys are growing almost as vigorously as the big beef tomatoes. And as you can see, I kind of have to come through here every day and kind of coax the branches up through the cages so they don't like spread out all over the place. They're doing very well. When they look green like that too, that's always a good sign. Next are the peppers, and I'm not going to be able to tell you the varieties because I'm, as usual, sort of ill prepared. But we've got peppers. You can see down here. Those we actually grilled some last night. These guys got at least blooms, if not. There's a little tiny one coming in there, but they are looking good and also bright green, which is a good sign. The next row is eggplants. They're blooming like crazy. I don't see any actual fruits yet, but all these blooms are looking pretty good, and we've been able to keep well ahead of the flea beetles too. I've sort of kind of done preventative spraying for those guys, which they just love eggplants for some reason. Hi Jesse, what do you think? Pretty exciting, huh? Corn's not ready yet though. Gotta wait for the corn, that comes later. Then the last 2 rows here are leeks, which I've had a little bit of an issue with the leeks, kind of getting these like sort of curly leaves. But some of them are looking pretty good. This one looks pretty fine like that. But you can see that this one kind of is not doing so well. So we're getting sort of mixed results compared to some years with the leeks, but it looks like we're going to get some pretty good ones. And that brings us on to bed 3, which is the half bed. And these are magnificent potato plants. The ones on the, let's see, we'll start here. These are red Norland Reds, I believe, red Norlands. These are Yukon Gold, and these are Kennebec, which are my go-to varieties that I like to use. You can see that these guys are blooming, and when they're blooming, that means within a few weeks there are going to be at least some potatoes showing up down below. We've hilled up a couple of times and added hay mulch, all of that to encourage the potatoes to grow in that loose sort of medium. And so it's always, you never know what you're going to get, but they're at least looking healthy on the top side here. That brings us to the other end of bed 3, and I planted garlic. Usually you plant garlic in the fall. This year I decided to just go ahead and plant it in the spring, and it seems to be doing fine. That's the flat-leaved stuff that you see here. And then the rest of this is 3 varieties of onions. And I can't quite remember which is which, but I think we've got Candy, Red, and Alyssa Craig. And they are also doing pretty well. And this is Mary. She's also doing well. And she's actually accenting the strawberries, which I always have a battle with the strawberries between me, bugs, rodents, and dogs. And I've managed to have quite a few of them, but the dogs have already also taken quite a few. This is a little tiny one, but it's just getting ripe, and this one is also. Surprisingly enough, even if you harvest them like this, they're very sweet, even if they don't turn fully red. So they're doing pretty well. That brings us to the sweet potatoes, which are beginning to take off a little bit, and you can see those mats that I have on there. I mentioned those last month. That's rodent protection, because the rodents just decimate the sweet potatoes if they get a chance to get in there. So I've had pretty good luck with using metal protection to keep them from the sweet potatoes. And the sweet potatoes always form right at the base of the vines, so that's what you need to have protected. Then on to pole beans, which, as I mentioned last time, I'm using kind of a different orientation, doing them this way instead of across the beds. And they all seem to be doing pretty well, looking pretty green, getting lots of blossoms. No beans yet, still a little early to see any beans. But as long as they're climbing up these trellises and blooming, that's a good sign. Now, that brings us to the 2 rows of peas. We have Chinese pea pod variety over here, and they're just starting to come in, but if you look closely, you can see there's a pretty nice pea pod right there that's fully edible and ready to go. And then we have snap peas, and I just finished harvesting a bunch of snap peas. In fact, I have a couple of stills, maybe even a video of the snap peas that I'll insert in here after the fact. But those guys are these that are the fatter variety of peas, but they're also edible pea pods. So if they're harvested correctly, then you don't have to shell them or anything like that. That brings us to 2 new ones for me this year. The first one, this darker green variety, this is Celeriac. Celeriac. So you'd think as a gardener I would know what I'm growing, but I don't. Celeriac, I've been told by certain people, is the correct pronunciation, and I would not argue with that. And it forms a bulb sort of down at the ground level there, but it tastes very much like celery. And then we have pugs that aren't being. Oh, you've got green stain on your. What have you been getting into?
Broccoli.
Oh, good broccoli, yummy! Look at this. Anyway, the next row over is celery, and the celery I actually have managed to wrap in newspaper for blanching, because the idea behind celery is that if you wrap the stalk, that pulls the chloroform up from the chlorophyll. I'm sorry. Correct it again. Up from the stems into the leaves, and that leaves the stems more blanched and tender. So again, first time I'm trying this. I like the way they look, but we have yet to see what's going to happen. This brings us on to another huge event in the garden. And if you're a garden follower, you know that I tried artichokes a few years ago, and they ended up being, they grew, the plants grew great. In fact, they lasted through the frost and everything else, but I never got a single artichoke. Well, now I've got buds, and so these should grow into the artichokes. These are the only 2 I've seen so far, but it's very promising that I've at least got 1 artichoke coming in too, and hopefully these others will eventually yield. But I gave them a lot more space. Last time they were kind of choked out by the tomatoes. So we'll see what goes on there. Now we are on bed number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at this end we have okra. The okra blooms during the day. The blooms actually close up in the evening. So I should come out and take a picture of these when they're blooming. But that's the pod that's left behind after it blooms. And that's what turns into the little okra pods. And these guys are going slow, but they're going okay. Beyond that, this is the ground cherries proper that we're growing. And we've got lots of ground cherries already showing up. But these little husks will turn more yellowish when they're ready. And the dogs love them. Frankie comes out and he harvests these as soon as they start getting ready. So they're looking pretty good. And the next couple of rows is spinach. Now we have some of the spinach that looks like it's going to seed or bolting. But if you remember, we were having a lot of problem with the spinach leaves earlier, and they do seem to have recovered. So a lot of these leaves, even if individually, would be harvestable and usable. So we'll be pulling some of those. Now here is a good example of old lettuce and new lettuce. This lettuce is past its prime. It's bolting. That's why it's shot up like this. I've found that the leaves are still edible, so I'll still harvest them at this point and try to use them. But they're very much past their prime when they do this sort of thing. And but in contrast with that is this row of lettuce, and these are all the same variety of fib lettuce, and they're just getting into their prime. So and we've actually done pretty well at keeping ahead of the lettuce, except for these guys here. Eating a lot of good salads. The next two rows are carrots, and against my better judgment, I bought a mix of carrots, meaning it's a mixture of varieties. They're all different colors, and we just had a stir fry of carrots that I thinned, and they came out as baby carrots. I'm not going to pull any now, but so getting them thinned out, we should get some good sized carrots for the next harvest.
Can I harvest a radish?
You may, yes, because I even was just about to skip over that completely. This was a row of radishes. There's only a couple left that, I had just left in because they could afford to get a little bit bigger. But
that's going to be
but
delicious.
That's a fine example of a radish. And if you're used to only having radishes in cold in salads, they're very good stir-fried, baked, or whatever, just as any other kind of root, like a potato or anything.
Yeah, they
like
were
that.
good last night.
And so we stir-fried them last night, and with the pea harvest and some broccoli and some other stuff. Speaking of broccoli, this brings us to Brassicas, and this row is all Brussels sprouts, which it'll be quite a while before we see any harvestable Brussels sprouts. They always take quite a while. This is actually a mixed row because this was cauliflower, and the cauliflower started to head nicely, but then it started to sort of sprout and separate. So I harvested them all pretty early and just replanted leftover brassicas in this row. The next row is broccoli. And as you can see, there's not much here because we just clipped all the broccoli off. In fact, Tashi just had some broccoli. Probably, she might have had this very one that was clipped off from right here. So right now we're in the side shoots season for broccoli, and I pretty much let these guys continue sending up little edible side shoots and enjoy them for the rest of the summer. This is cabbage, this row here.
That's beautiful.
And it's cold storage cabbage, number 4, I think, which is an unimaginative name, but I've had a great deal of luck with them, and they stay in the fridge literally for months, and you can use them, down the road. New for me this year is kale. Got some hamlets all over this kale, kind of destroying aesthetics of it. But you can see it very, very healthy. I pulled one of these plants a week or so ago and used it in a salad. I've also made kale chips, which is kind of fun. I haven't done that with my stuff, but I did it with some store-bought kale. So I'm going to try to do that too. Okay, I think that brings us to bed number 6. And bed number 6 is just a fun bed, and all it is sunflowers and volunteer marigolds, meaning all those marigolds came up on their own. We didn't plant a single one from just seeds from previous years that got left in these beds. So we're trying to do 5 sunflowers per row, and then whatever marigolds come up in addition. And we just got that all hay mulched, so the weeding chore should be significantly reduced for my French ballerina, who is the weeding expert. Where'd she go, by the way? So let's see if we can safely step out. Oh, she's collecting pine cones out there. Safely step out of the garden for a moment without falling over. Ah! There we go. And this year the external bed, we're again kind of against my better judgment. I'm attempting cucurbits. I have a world of trouble keeping these vines healthy and alive for an entire season, but right now they look pretty good. This first row is melons, and they are small, but they're looking okay at least. I just got them mulched and out from underneath the floating row covers, which I'm trying to use. I used for the first time this year as pest protection against the early plants. The next row here looks very healthy, and it's acorn squash, and like I say, looking pretty good. You gotta watch out for the electric fence. This row is a pretty pathetic row because it's Waltham butternut, and for some reason the pest spray that I used on the Waltham butternut, these guys did not like it. I think maybe I put a little bit of organic soap in the solution to make it, adhere to the leaves, and I think maybe I put too much in. None of the other varieties minded it, but the Waltham butternuts really did not take to it. These next 2 varieties are pumpkins. This first one is a pumpkin pie pumpkin, New England pie I think it's called, and this other one is a larger pumpkin, not a giant, but jack-o'-lantern. And you can see there that we do have some pumpkins forming. That guy is just about to open up, and if it gets pollinated, it will carry on. But and you can see on this side, the jack-o'-lantern pumpkins the vines are already coming out into the open area here. So I think that pretty much covers this area. He's coming out over here, so I guess I'll leave him. But they're growing quite vigorously. But the big trick with them is just being able to keep those vines healthy throughout the summer, especially once it gets to be August and stuff, because if they're not hit by mildew, they're hit by squash bugs and cucumber beetles and everything else. So where we're going now is what used to be called the mini orchard, but now it's just an apple tree, because one by one the other trees just gave up the ghost, and I decided not to replant out here. So this is a red delicious, and although they're all green now, we do have lots of them, and a fairly promising potential here, because if they've lasted this long, then for the most part they're probably going to hang on to the end of the year if I can keep up with the spraying and keep the bugs off them. And it looks like we might get a fairly good harvest on these guys. So let's go to the other fruit trees, and we may compress the time here as we walk. So bear with me, but let's go see what's going on back in the yard. Okay, so this is our little pear tree, and right now it looks great. You can see the number of pears that are hanging out on all these branches, just pulling them down. And the fruit trees it's always a kind of a flip of a coin whether these things are just gonna last all the way to the fall. Right now they look great. I had a lot last August, and then by the time the fall came around, they were literally all gone. I don't know if that was because squirrels got to them or whatever. But right now they look great and show a lot of promise. The next tree here, and this was planted last spring, so it's a little over a year that it's been in the ground. This is a nectarine, and as you might be able to see, there's a fair amount of nectarines on here, maybe a half dozen or a dozen if you were to count them all. There's a lot less than there used to be, as evidenced by these guys on the ground down here. And with the fruit trees, especially a young fruit tree like this, again, it's always, you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that some make it all the way. So if we end up getting a half dozen, that's pretty good. And that's not bad for a fruit tree that's only been in the ground for a year and a half either. This one here is peach, and it's not doing quite as well, but you can see there are a few little hairy peaches hanging out here. There might be less than 6 on this tree, but I did find a few here the other day when I was looking around. I can only find one right now, so it might be if we get one peach out of this tree, we're going to be lucky. Because I can't find another one right now. But still, again, it's the first year, so you don't even know. Here's another little one. Oh, 2 up here. That's right. I thought I saw a couple of those. So we'll be lucky if we get any out of that one. But that's not too bad. So I think that's going to do it. I mean, we've got sunflowers growing across the back deck that are doing really well. I actually started and put them outside really early because I was just testing to see how the germination would work on them, and it worked so well that I needed to plant them, but I planted them much earlier than I normally would because of frost-dates and stuff. But they're all doing pretty well, except for guys like this that got kind of blown and knocked over. The goldfinches are already helping themselves to the seeds that aren't even done yet. And these guys are asparagus, which I've had iffy luck with over the years, but they come back every year, and we get a few shoots every year. I don't see any new ones coming up, and then we let some of them just grow. And so that pretty much sums up the asparagus, and that pretty much sums up the garden for June 2017. So we'll stroll back and look at the flowers. Let's take a glance at the pond while we're here. The light is getting low. Take a glance at the lovely French ballerina who helps keep everything in order. And is a tireless person. The ponds, it's a little murky right now, but completely redid all the rocks in the pond. The plants are starting to really take off, so that looks pretty nice. The fish have already been fed, but they think maybe they need to get fed again. And Frankie needs to find frogs. That's his mission in life when he's around the pond. But that's going to do it. Nice purple iris is blooming there, and the tiger lilies are starting to come in. It's that kind of year. And through the archway, and the Bijon. Hi, Julie. You liking it in the garden? Well, of course you are. So,
We've got some green tomatoes.
we do have green tomatoes of the beefsteaks there.
Right here.
You saw some? I think we looked at. Oh yeah, I see.
Do you see?
There's some right down here. They're coming in nice and
on the top
round.
too? I know there was.
I saw it right over here.
Mm-hmm.
These are the main ones, and we did already look at some that were over there. But that's gonna do it. I think we got ourselves a good garden going here. Oh, Frankie got like that. I'll come out there and get you in a second, boy. So this is Marvin Gardens, June 2017, and one of my favorite times in the garden. Of course, there are very few times that aren't a favorite time of mine in the garden, but in June, even though the harvest hasn't really kicked off yet, everything is exploding growth-wise. Everything is green. There is the promise of wonderful harvests to come, and it's just a great time to be out here. And that's going to do it. So we will see you next month in July. And as you know, July are the high holy days of gardening. So hope you're having a great start to your summer, and we'll have a wonderful summer going forward. And we will talk to you again in July. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go rescue my dog because he wants to come into the garden and enjoy the June garden. Bye, everybody.